All right, welcome to the continuation of the True Potential Women's Summit. Today, I am really excited to introduce you to our next guest, which is Patty Contenta. Today, she's going to be talking about how to use the power of desirability, and we're going to be talking about what it is, how to utilize it, and how to access this feminine art in the way that we interact and show up in life. Thank you so much, Patty, for being on today.
Thanks for having me, Andrea. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about desirability and what it is.
Desirability is really the idea that it's related to this strong feeling or this wanting and this yearning for something to happen, and it has a certain seductive flavor to it, so that and because of it, it allows you to kind of relish every ounce of every experience. And so when you put yourself in this idea of igniting desire, it creates anticipation and makes every experience more enjoyable. And there's a certain kind of mystery and tension that's related to that, because it's a little bit of this not knowing, because of the mystery, it fuels the imagination, because it's not obvious, it's very subtle. So it's the subtlety that creates desire, that creates this tension and ignites and fuels the imagination. So usually when I talk to women about creating this kind of experience of being a more desirable woman, it's not always about the most obvious of things. It's in the subtleties that creates this. So and that's what makes things more delicious. So I want women to understand that it's not about being blatantly forward and out there. It's really about being subtle, and it's about creating this kind of mystery and intention through some of the things that you do, including the body language piece that I do share with women. So yes, so that's basically the essence of desirability.
Wonderful. Now, can you give us for instance of how you've utilized desirability in your own life to create that juiciness or that excitement or that manifestation of what you want in your life or that attraction?
Absolutely. One of the things that I do, because desirability is made up of two ingredients, I'm going to share with you, and then I'll what they are, and then I'll give you an example of how I would use it. So one of them is sensuality, which is the ability to kind of elevate the senses, and which allows you to be more present in your body and the way you manage your sexual energy. And the other part is the feminine energy, which is much more receptive and connected to the heart and to the emotions, and much more about allowing things to happen and being more. So when I want to try to ignite desire in one of those two ingredients, it can be having dinner with someone where I'm relishing everything that is entering my mouth. Okay, that sounds just as I said that. Oh my gosh.
No, I think it's perfect. I think it's great.
Perfect. But see, but in the end, it does that. I'm Italian, as are you.
Yes,
So food is extremely important to us. The preparation, the smells, the taste, that heightens your sensuality. That puts you very much in your body. And so when you're experiencing even food in that manner, where you allow all the different flavors that are, hitting your palate, and how they taste, and what's behind the taste, and, you know, having a conversation about that ignites desire,
I'm
because
salivating as I'm thinking about preparing dinner.
but right, there's something pleasurable and juicy about that, and that in itself, when you're in the presence of other people, it kind of gets people much more in their bodies and less in their heads, right? So this idea of relishing the moments with the food, it could be listening to music. Like if I'm in my car driving, I listen to music that makes, depending on the mood that I'm in, that kind of inspires something within me, and I let my body be transported into that. I don't just hear it for a purpose of getting to a place. I hear it for the purpose of take me away, Calgon. So all of this, when we say elevating the senses, is allowing those to be fully embodied, so that you become more in your body, and ultimately um, that feeling is what creates a certain kind of mystery, and what creates this wanting or yearning, and this subtlety. And it's not necessarily about the clothes that you're wearing or the body that you have. Not that that doesn't help, but it's more the subtlety, and the senses that you kind of delve into more. So that's an example of how I truly allow myself to experience that fully, because it gets me out of my head and into my body, and therefore replenishes me. And in the process of being replenished, I also create a more playful, desirable experience of whoever's around me, even for myself. That's what ends up happening. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm curious about this other ingredient of the feminine essence.
Yes.
With that, can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. The feminine essence really is this idea of, it's a life force of trying to be in your body and more present with your creative side, with your emotions, with your heart. So, and I often refer to it as a pre-manifestation, meaning while you're in the process of doing and planning, which is very masculine, there's times where you may need to take what I call a pause. And in those moments of pause, you allow yourself to kind of tap into what's going on inside of you, what feels right. You kind of pay attention to your internal cues, because they're trying to tell you something. And so it's often related to your emotions, to your heart, to a feeling that you have. So, and it inspires, the being is by paying attention to the internal cues that are going on within you. And so, and you can do that by listening in, and sometimes you can do that, where I'll say, through body language, to also experience a more feminine spirit in your movement. So, for example, I see this a lot in the ballroom, because my background is ballroom dancing, right, or rhythm Latin dancing.
Right.
So there's a way that a man moves, and his intent is different within the embrace of a woman. And so it's not just a question of lead and follow, it's the intent and what is the purpose within this movement, and that we're trying to create. The masculine is a protective space that he tries to keep the others away while he takes all of you in. The woman has to move in a manner where she's very receptive of that gift that he provides you with. So through the way she moves, and she uses the arches in her body, how she leans back in her stance, how she creates how she uses her eyes, allows for that planning and strategy of the masculine to continue, because you're so open and receptive to it. So there's also that side of the feminine. So there's sort of the emotional, pay attention to internal cues, and then there's the physical part, where you can enhance that desire, if you will, through the way you move, which is different than the masculine. And not that one is better than the other, it just creates it has a different purpose.
So, with us as women in a very masculine, energetic environment, how do we support ourselves so that we can really notice when we're getting out of alignment of our feminine essence, or out of our alignment from our body and the senses? And how can we realign? Are there some strategies or tips
Yes.
in helping women to be supported in this way?
Absolutely. So for me, I often talk about the body language piece, and I say this because, motion creates emotion, right? It will affect you inevitably. It's where my background lies. And so I usually I'll be sharing some of these kind of what I call transition tools, which is those few seconds throughout your day when you're in between tasks and need to create a space to shift your energy. So you begin to say, okay, now it's time to be in my feminine a little bit more, as I'm walking from one place to the next, or as I'm having a phone conversation that maybe requires me to be more open and receptive. So I use my physical way of being in order to transition, so that it doesn't have to be a 2-hour process. It's in the moments throughout your day, really just a few seconds. So, for example, if I share one with you, I talk about inner thigh awareness. Okay, we use this a lot in dancing, And in the end, I use this a lot in my everyday life, and I share this with women because there's a difference in the way a man walks or sits or moves, especially when he's walking, for example, or the masculine in comparison to the feminine. The masculine tends to walk with a stance where the legs are wider apart because he has to show that, let's say, there's a dominance, there's power, there's authority there. The feminine, not that she doesn't want to be authoritative at times, but what she wants to be in a place where she's trying to embody this sort of feminine sexiness, if you will.
Right.
Then she wants to be aware of her inner thighs when you're walking from one foot to the other, when you're sitting down, when you're picking something up, bending over and picking something up. This idea of allowing your inner thighs to want to come close together changes the way the body looks and moves. And therefore know that in that instant, because intention really is also key to all of this, right? I say this idea of intention as a side note because we can do anything, but without the proper intention, it doesn't have the same kind of quality or quantity of experience, right?
Right.
So you want to be clear with the intent that my goal is every time I do this is to replenish my feminine essence. And so every time I'm aware and I'm walking with inner thigh awareness, there's a different sway that happens to my body. And I know in that moment, my feminine spirit is being replenished. So I make sure that that's the intent behind it. And then so that every time I do it, it has more quality and more power in doing it, if that makes any sense. So it changes visually what a woman looks like and moves like and feels like. So it's a simple thing, but you'd be surprised if you watch people walk. I mean, I'm a big observer of people. I'll be anywhere and just start people watching because I enjoy to kind of sense where stiffness is at. I tend to look at that. Is there stiffness that's being held in the body? Are they happy? Are they playful? Is there rigidity? Are they upset about something? And that might be right or wrong, but that's how we are as human natures, right? We observe and we make judgment. Unfortunately, we all tend to kind of do that.
Yeah.
We want to stay receptive and open, but we kind of watch and kind of make a decision on someone without even having a conversation, or even if we do, within a few seconds, our mind just goes into
assessment.
Say, yeah, totally, yes or no, maybe, or whatever that is. So you want to make your body language more conscious instead of unconscious, where you don't even realize perhaps the cues that you might be sending out. So being aware of your inner thighs every time you get up and walk from one place to another will change the way you move. And there's a sort of playful energy that shows up with that. Yeah. As compared to just I have to go there because I need to get this piece of paper, or I need to go get a coffee to come back because I really need a hit of coffee. I'm going to go get a coffee and I'm going to be aware of my inner thighs as I do this because I know I'm replenishing my feminine spirit in the process. So that's an example of a tool that women can become much more conscious of, knowing that is helping them be more supportive in their feminine instead of feeling like it's depleted and ignored and I have to set aside 5 hours to be in that space. You don't. You know what I mean?
It can be little instances periodically throughout the day to recharge our connection to our feminine essence. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of times we can say, oh, well, I want to be sexy. Oh, I want to be desirable. If that's the intention, then potentially it's really dependent upon the external environment. And that's the intention, and then that could potentially get, mixed signals and all. But when the intention is really for yourself, for your own pleasure, for your own, then it actually allows you to hone in and maintain your power, maintain your energy, and maintain the charge of that energy for yourself. And then the extra that you, as a result, the ripple effect of that is what you give to others. So then it kind of shifts out of that codependent pattern, and more into that empowered feminine place.
Very well said, Andrea. I completely agree with you. When it becomes something about your own replenishing and for you, inevitably there's something that happens to the people. They'll feel it around you, but it's not externally motivated. It's internally motivated for you to do that. So I agree 100%. And Yeah, that's why I feel that women can do some of these practices for themselves, regardless of man or no man or people around you in your life. It's about making this a practice like anything
Right.
else.
Right. Now, what are some of the struggles that women face with their sexuality or sensuality, that you see with the women that you work with?
You know, uh, women really, there's many things that they struggle with, but one of the things that we often, well, a few. So one of the things that we wrestle with is, how to be strong, how to be feminine, how to be confident in our own body's expression. We're constantly trying to maneuver how much is too much or more or less, that it puts us in a constant place of self-doubt. It's one of the things that I see a lot, that we're always trying to manage how much is too much, how little is too little, what's this, what's that. And so when we don't even trust ourselves in this process, or we're the first ones to even judge ourselves relentlessly about how we look, if we're too loud, if we're too assertive, if our thighs are too big, it puts us in a place of constant insecurity and self-doubt. I mean, this idea of we never quite know um, what's the right thing for us.
Hmm.
So that's kind of like a big one. And then that stems from things of, being brought up in a good, to be a good girl, where, your role is to please, is to sacrifice your needs for the family instead of thinking about yourself first. Depending on your ethnic background, that can, you could have been brought up with that. I know I was very much,
Hmm.
brought up in that environment. Or a high-powered woman who probably has sacrificed her feminine energy in a way to be more respected in the workplace, to sort of create
To
this
self
professional
abandon,
top.
to
Yeah,
self abandon the feminine.
just leave it alone because there's no place for it right now. And not
Hmm.
even that she was conscious of it, but to be successful in the Western world, it does require a much more masculine approach to things. The tendency is that. So she may have inadvertently left that behind. Maybe even women that are tomboys, let's say, in the sense of they exhibit characteristics that are considered more masculine, or they wear more masculine clothing, or they do activities dominated by men, whichever one of those things that may be.
Hmm.
There's nothing wrong with any of them. I think what women need to more is pay attention to is when they feel this sense of I've let a part of me go in the process of taking care of all of this. That's where you need to say, what do I need to do to replenish?
Hmm.
And it doesn't mean that you have to feel bad about being this high powered woman. Not at all. Kudos to you. Just maybe do things, not maybe, ultimately do things where you can still feel like you're nurturing your feminine side in the process. So that, because I remember, I'm a entrepreneur. I just,
Hmm.
I own a couple of businesses. I'm just always running around. But in my running around, I consciously use my own stuff in the sense of saying, I have to, I'm walking through the airport and I'm using my inner thighs, and I'm going to, do a little self touch, and I'm going to just kind of breathe and pay attention to the moment. And, I do these things so that I feel like I know that I'm nurturing myself instead of, again, waiting for, I need a day off. Yes, I want a day off, but it's not, I'm just waiting for that one day. I make conscious small experiences regularly, knowing that this is helping me move forward, and I'm not letting go of my sexiness, if you will, or my femininity in the pursuit of trying to create abundance in my life. You know what I mean?
Right, right. I think that it's interesting that there are so many conflicting messages for women. It's
Mm.
like being, too sexy, or you need to be sexy, or, oh, being prudish, so there are a lot of mixed messages, and they're all coming from the outside. So I think being able to really, I think we as women, because we are able to be caretakers and focus on multitasking, that we can think a lot of the focus being outside of ourselves, and where we do lose our own sense of center, or our own, what is my truth, because
Mm-hmm.
we're growing up in a society maybe that focuses on, getting our, I guess, feedback of if we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing from the external. I think it can actually be a disadvantage to us, because we really don't tap into what our knowing is, or not, that's not nurtured enough for us. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, completely, completely. Especially when we're like you said, you're kind of waiting for the outside world to let you know if you're on the right track or not, you know.
Right.
And I think this is where I really feel the advantage of aging. You start to be in a place where, excuse me for saying, but you just don't give a shit anymore. Like you don't. Like I can feel it more now than I ever have.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really, and there's something about that time and that wisdom when you've lived through so many things in your life where it was so much more about impressing and doing the right thing in order to be acknowledged, that now you just know that this is me, and I'm going to take care of me first in the process of creating what I need to create. And I always say I wish I knew this earlier, but I think it's only with time that you develop that, and that's sort of the beauty of aging. Is there's this whether it's a peacefulness, this acceptance, that's a better word. There's
Right.
an acceptance that begins to happen where you're always working on yourself because you know that this is part of the human experience. Once you step into personal growth and development and trying to be the best version of yourself, because that's all we can commit to as human
Mm-hmm.
beings once we are on this planet, is to
Absolutely.
say, I want to be the best version of me. And it's going to require some work. It does. It comes with that, but you begin to feel lighter about it because it's not motivated by whether this person likes me or is appreciative of what I'm doing. It ends up being because it feels good for me.
It's
And
desirable.
so it's
Right.
completely different fuel behind that. So I share this with women, this idea of stepping into their bodies a little bit more for that, as a way to discover their own body self-expression. You'll
Mm-hmm.
know, maybe you like this more and you want to turn, the beauty of this is going to be like a dial that you could turn up or down depending on your scenario and your context, so
Mm-hmm.
that you become the one that decides how much or how little you want to play with that. And
Right.
and it's not dependent on what you want to receive from the other person as much as what you want to give back to yourself according to the context that you're in. A
Right.
workplace is different than a place where you're at a party or you're at everything requires different different amounts of energy depending on your context. So your environment. So ultimately in this place is really the role for me in sharing this is to allow women to kind of really go on this self-discovery of the body's expression, because
Yeah.
your body is attached to your soul and to your mind, and so use that as a way to kind of feel that feminine sexiness, energy, sensuality, if you want that, and
Right.
allow yourself to express it and discover what feels right for you, because we each have different flavors with it. So go in there and try these
Right.
different things out.
And I think what probably, there's like what I was speaking to before is like this taboo that,
Yeah.
almost feeling disconnected from our sensual center,
Hmm.
because of centuries of, maybe it being so powerful that it was intimidating. So
Yeah.
so society made it wrong to kind of keep it in check. But I think really, being able to connect with that as a woman, our sensual center, our hips, our movement, dance, really our body, really taps us back into the true essence and the true power within us. And sometimes we've been socialized or through history to be disconnected from it or to make it wrong when really it's right.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I totally agree, and hopefully, as women hear this, that they're going to allow themselves to go on this journey of rediscovering that, and again, with what I share, it's so subtle that it allows you to do that pretty much any time, any day. Like when I'm talking about inner thigh awareness, it's how many times a day do you walk? So just make that a habit of paying attention to your inner thighs when you walk, because there's something that's going to change or shift within you.
Mm-hmm.
As an example. And then eventually you can go into other journeys that are more encompassing and require, more of your physical presence. But ultimately, these are simple tools that women can start using literally day to day. Just start thinking about your inner thighs when you walk. Like, what does that feel like? How do you sway? How do you move?
So with that, what are some other tools and techniques that can help women shift into their feminine? Aside from the one that you mentioned, are there other tools
Yeah.
that you can recommend that some of our listeners can tap into and utilize?
Sure. Another one that I share is what I call lean back. And what I mean by lean back
I'm
is
gonna
every
practice
time.
as I do
Um,
it.
what was that?
I'll practice as you
Yeah,
share it.
as you lean back. So you lean back in your chair, and just know again, if we clarify the intent of the lean back,
Mhm.
I call it the melting process, where you literally melt away the ice that's been built up all day long. There's and I learned this melting process through dancing, and I remember a coach telling my partner at the time, he said, your role, and he was leading, right, is to melt her ice. The only way she could trust you, allow you to go in there, is the second you hold her with your presence and the way you maneuver her, she abandons and lets herself go and melts the ice. And I was like, oh my God, that is so wonderful. So and then I thought to myself, can I do this for me?
Mm.
I don't want to rely on someone else to create that for me. It's one thing artistically when there's a man and a woman dancing, or even when you're in the presence of a man, if you're a couple together and you want to experience this, like, wow, amazing. What about for myself? So I physically began to lean back when I'm listening to a conversation, because it creates a different. I'm allowing the melting process to happen. It allows me to be more receptive, to sort of welcome and soften. And in the process of welcoming and softening, I'm truly, the intent is I welcome this masculine gift, or if it's with another woman, I welcome this conversation. And it does not mean I don't have boundaries and I don't have things that I don't have to agree to everything that's being shared. I'm welcoming it for the opportunity that it could provide. And that opportunity might be to set a boundary. I don't know. But at least it opens up the possibility of seeing what's there. So when I'm on a phone call sometimes and I want to create a rapport, I really want to pay attention. I do lean back in my chair because it allows me to just be more, because I'm less in my head and trying to think ahead. I just want to be in what's happening. So I have to physically lean back in my chair. When I'm standing and I'm in the presence of other people and it's a moment of receiving them and what they're sharing, I lean back. When I'm ordering a coffee at Starbucks and I'm looking at what I should have, I lean back. And it changes my tone. My voice tone actually changes when I'm in my lean back. And I'm conscious of it because I know when I need to motivate, I'm forward in my leaning, right? I start to go in there and I start to share thoughts, and it doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It's just a different intent. So when I'm coaching or teaching or I'm excited about something, I lean forward because I'm in the process of hear me roar. I have something to tell you, and then I lean back, right?
Right.
I lean back to allow, now it's your turn. Let me be receptive to what you are sharing. So it's this constant dance. So I allow the lean back process. I'm more conscious of that. My physical lean back is allowing the melting process to happen and to be more receptive and welcoming to what's being shared.
Right. I know me as a therapist, I definitely know what you mean as being a receiver and being taking a step back and being present and holding space. It
Mm,
definitely is a different energy when you're shifting back and forth.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, what would be another tool that could be helpful for women to tap into so they can connect with their feminine essence or with their body?
Another one that I share with women is called caressing yourself, or self
Mm.
touch. Okay.
I think I saw
Um,
this on your website.
yeah, and it's one of my personal favorites. All mostly because I really learned this when I was competing in my competitive days. I went to see a coach. This guy was oh God, he must have been in close to his 70s, and he was supposed to be the guy that really pulls a lot of things out of dance couples. And so we went to see him, and I was dancing a rumba with my partner, because the rumba was the one that is technically most difficult, and it's slow enough where you can. It's harder to be fast yet slow. It requires a lot more of the body, and it's very much the dance for the woman, where the man sort of frames her essence. So we were dancing at the rumba, and probably 20, 30 seconds in, 20 seconds even after that, he stops the music and he came up to me and said, Patty, like, do you love yourself? Because you're not dancing like a woman that does. I said, what do you mean? And he goes, watch this. And he starts dancing. And right in that moment, he starts to transform. Now, picture a 70-year-old man. I mean, he also had a whiskey in one hand and a cigar in the other, just to tell you. He puts both of those things down and puts on the music and starts moving. And I was like, wow, look at you. You look so feminine and so sensual. And I noticed what he was doing. He hadn't specifically told me, but I was paying attention. And I noticed that there was a lot of self-touch, which means before my arms would go out or reach out to him, I would caress my thigh or my side, my rib cage, my shoulder, my neck, my hair, anything before I would reach out to him. So I began to use this in my dancing, which really changed the way I moved. And then ultimately in everyday life, where I started to, when I would stop to order a coffee, I would, or sitting at a table, I would gently begin to caress my neck or my wrist or my hand. Because I knew in that moment, I was telling myself that, I love my skin, the feel of my body. Again, the intention. I'm reminding myself that my physical body is perfect, and that I love every inch of me. And so that exudes a different kind of energy. And so this idea of self-touch is to give back to yourself, which changes your energy of how you show up. So this idea of self-touch, any chance you get, shoulder, your neck, your thigh, your fingers, your hair, it's just reminders of I love myself and every part of me, and that you're stimulated. You're stimulated by that. It actually does something to me when I do that. So yeah, that's this idea of self-touch.
So I'm curious because I'm sure that a lot of people can probably relate to this, and being a therapist that specializes in trauma, that's one of my specialties, is kind of this conflict of like being in your sensuality, being in your feminine, being, in that pleasure place with yourself, that potentially has been a threat, or, being threatened in some way. So I'm curious, like, how can a woman, both feel safe being in their love or their sensuality, like self-love, where we're not attracting potential threat. Does that make sense what I'm asking you? Because I think it's something that a lot of women, I mean, if you think about it, walking to your car, you're constantly like, making sure that you're safe. So how does a woman still feel safe and still not feel like she has to disconnect from her feminine in order to be that way, that she can actually embrace her feminine and feel safe at the same time?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of things there, and those are all very valid points. So one, I would say, if you have to do it by yourself in the comforts of your own home, to kind of make you just feel what that's like. Now, everything I'm sharing, we're talking about it a lot, but it is very subtle. But it does create a ripple effect, absolutely. But it's this idea of, if you have to, you choose the environment that makes you feel safest to do it in. So first, does it need to be by yourself in front of a mirror? Second, maybe just with girlfriends and not necessarily with any kind of men around you, if that's the next step that you need to do it in, so that you know that it's not about kind of creating any kind of attraction or someone to move towards you. And sometimes it could be where you're just walking, where there's maybe in a public place where there's a lot of people, where everybody's all on cell phones and not even paying attention, but at least you're kind of doing it in an area where there's a lot of people, where it's easier as compared to where you're alone and there's only one other person, and then that feels more self-conscious. Maybe in a situation where there's more people might be easier. So you have to choose the environment that feels good for you, from first doing it alone to first doing it with other women to maybe doing it with maybe a party that you're invited to where people at, and you start doing it, to these kinds of things, till eventually you feel safe and encouraged to kind of do it when there's strangers around. But it's so, and I get, and I'm not trying to diminish the trauma associated with some of the women that they've gone through that. But what I'm sharing is about being so subtle and so soft that you decide, for example, if you're going to do a self-touch, that maybe it's just your neck a little bit and then you stop.
Right.
Maybe it's just your hair and brushing it regularly, telling yourself that, I love the feel of my hair because it's part of me, and that's it, and it doesn't have to be about using your eye contact with another guy on top of that, right? So here's where I dial it up some more, where if
Right.
I'm in an environment where the guy might do the hair and look at him and maybe and add a smile and then turn away or whatever, right? So now I'm inviting something else, but
Right.
I could just do it for myself and not look at anybody, but it's for me. So there's different cues, different things that you're going to turn up the dial. So
Right.
they could choose to keep it at 1 or 2 and slowly turn it up depending on how they check in and feel with themselves in this process.
Right. Absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation. Are there any last minute tips that you'd like to share on this topic, or share any ways that a free gift of being able to offer to our audience today?
Yes, yes, I do have a free gift. It is if they go to desirableanddeserving.com. They will get access to some free videos where I describe how to shift the energy, kind of a little bit of what we talked about. You'll see me visually doing it in order to melt more into your feminine essence and be more approachable, if you will. And so that's for free. That way they can kind of take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And and I really want to leave with the idea that really approach all of this in a playful manner so that you don't take it too seriously, but in a way of, I just want to kind of discover parts of myself,
Mm-hmm.
and have fun with it and not try to get everything right. It's about discovering your body's expression, what feels right for you. So using some of these tools as a way of being playful and self-discovery. And
Mm-hmm.
then you'll find out, you'll start to tweak things. You'll start to have more guts with all of this as as
Mm-hmm.
as we describe that, so yeah, that's what I
Wonderful.
would say.
Wonderful. Well, there you have it. We had Patty Contenta on our show today on the summit. Wonderful having you today and talking about desirability, what it is, how to utilize it, and incorporating that in your life. And we have other speakers that are coming up on the True Potential Women's Summit. Looking forward to connecting with you then. Thank you again, Patty, for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.